Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. I'm Jason Oliver here today with my fellow co-hosts Jeff R. Buckle and Chuck Moore. Say hello, guys.
Hello, guys. We did the same thing.
And this week we have for you 1975's The Man Who Would Be King. So I guess this is kind of another anniversary of sorts. A little bit late, a few weeks late on the anniversary because we're in 2021 now. It's our first episode of the new year.
We made it to 2021.
Well, okay, we are recording this on November 28th of 2020, so I'm going to assume we made it.
We made it.
Yes. This movie stars Sean Connery, Michael Caine, and Christopher Plummer. Three big heavy hitters, and was directed by an even bigger heavy hitter, arguably, in John Huston, who we've also met along the way of this film Seizure journey back as an actor in Chinatown. So now we get to cover one of his movies that he has directed, which is fairly well liked, but maybe isn't really what he's known for. I mean, he's kind of Maltese Falcon and stuff like that, are things that he's probably most known for. This one sort of, I think, goes under the radar these days. And I'm not quite sure why, but maybe that's something we can dig into a little bit. For me, this is a movie that I grew up with. I have a lot of love for this movie. This movie and Lawrence of Arabia were kind of like the two sort of like adventure desert movies that I just watched all the time as a kid and as a teenager. And there's a lot of kind of parallel between this and Lawrence of Arabia as well. There are overlapping themes that I'd like to talk about at some point too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you why you selected this movie, because it's a movie whose title that I'm aware of, but I was not. While watching this, I thought, this is the type of movie that the teacher would put on for the kids to watch, like before Christmas break or so. It's like we got nothing left. We got nothing left for this semester. You were just going to watch this movie. And take a nap if you want to, kids, and then come back in January or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I do not have really any nostalgia for this movie. I'd never seen this movie. Mm-hmm. I will also admit I'm not sure I still have even seen this movie. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I was just curious what brought this movie to this, because it's one that I knew the title of, but never knew anything about.
Yeah, and that's just it. I mean, it's just one that I don't even know when I first saw this movie. It's just, I feel like it's one of those movies that's always kind of been in my life. And it's not even one that my parents particularly liked or knew about. It's just one I think I discovered on TV one day. And I had a VHS copy of it that I taped off of TV and used to watch a lot. And then we watched it again. I had kind of forgotten about it, and we watched it again in high school, which is kind of funny.
Because I just brought up I was thinking more like 6th, 7th grade, but yeah, okay.
But no, this was like, it wasn't like for class. It was in boarding school. It was one of the movies that our chaplain liked, who introduced us to a lot of like Hammer horror stuff too, funny enough. But that's
pretty awesome.
Yeah, but this is one that he showed just during like rec time, and I was like, I know this movie. I love this movie, and it kind of reinvigorated my love for it. And then eventually it got a Blu-ray release several years back, and I was like one of the first to grab that sucker. I just always liked it. It's very kind of adventure-y. It's a cautionary tale. Caine and Sean Connery are just so good playing against each other and with each other in this. I don't know, it just kind of appealed to to my sense of adventure, I guess, when I was a young boy,
A young lad.
young lad. And I was always kind of intrigued by the Masonic aspects of it too.
I was rather
Masonry.
surprised how big that was in this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, because I never really understood what Masonry was all about, and I still don't understand what Masonry is all about. But the mystical angle of that, and then you have Alexander the Great thrown in here. It's just lots of really neato kind of Indiana Jones stuff, kind of in the middle of this pot. Yeah. So anyway, I'm talking a lot.
I guess I can say something here. This movie was very familiar to me, even though I don't think I ever saw it. It kind of reminds me of a tale that like Monty Python would tell, in a way, like an Arthurian legend or something.
It is shot very similarly to the Monty Python movies in some scenes.
Yeah, it harkened back to that. So I did get the adventure part of this story. I really dug. I thought it was fun, funny. Serious enough at times. I mean, but it didn't take itself too damn seriously, which kind of played against itself in some moments, I think. But overall, this reminded me of those movies, those adventure movies I'd watch as a kid as well. Just never saw this one, I don't think.
Yeah, so I guess I can explain my experience of watching this last night. So as I said to you guys before we started recording, it's like I'm a tad bit under the weather here right now. I got a little bit of bronchitis, which I think is probably between the meds I've taken to like feel better. It's also like my brain probably doesn't have enough air getting to it. But I struggled very, very mightily getting into this movie. Until because at one point I texted Chuck and I was like, they're just murdering dudes right now. And he had to explain to me that they were bad guys, that they were like bandits. And I'm like, okay. And then they took him to that village, which we'll get to. And then it started kind of clicking a little bit what was happening. I was struggling really, really hard understanding what everybody was talking about in the first half of the movie. I couldn't understand Michael Caine. I could barely understand, then on the other side of it, the posh accent of Christopher Plummer. I'm like, what the fuck are these people talking about? And then once it settled and they settled into that encampment and they started training those villagers to go on raids and everything, then I realized, okay, now I kind of understand what they're doing, the con that they're playing, sort of. And then of course at that point then it started saying, okay, now I see how it all fits together, but I'm still not entirely sure I know what happened in the first half of this movie. So,
Okay.
Jason, I'm glad you're here.
Well, let me break it down for you.
Okay, thank you.
So the movie begins with first of all, it's important to note that it takes place in British occupied India. So the British, I had this written down, the British occupied, or India was under British rule from 1858 to 1947. This was in the late 1800s, I believe, is when this movie takes place. So it's right in the middle of British rule, in the sort of the UK, British expansion, colonialism era, right? Which is really important because that's the source material is based on a Rudyard Kipling short story. And he was a very, very outspoken colonialist for the British Empire. He, for better or worse, but he was pro-colonialism. But he also was realistic about what colonialism meant and how that could affect both the people who were being occupied and the occupiers, which we can get into a little later. But what we have here is Rudyard Kipling is as the correspondent for the Northern Star, which is a newspaper in India, a UK newspaper in India, which he actually did work for. And then here's where the bit of fiction comes into play. He meets a man in a train station. It's like Michael Caine. Michael Caine's a pickpocket, picks his watch, Rudyard Kipling's watch, and he realizes that it has a symbol of the Mason on it, and he's like, ah, shit. Apparently he can't. He's a Mason too. He can't steal from a brother Mason, so he goes to return the watch, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he goes and returns the watch in a kind of hilariously sort of racist way, because he throws a Sikh who's eating a watermelon off of the train, and then claims that that the Sikh was the one who was stealing the watch.
I did like that every time that Michael Caine was like giving the Sikh a tongue lashing, he was always like, "Thank you, sir." It's like the Sikh was...
even as he's thrown him off the train.
Yeah, so thank you, sir.
So then he has a conversation with Rudyard Kipling, who is played by Christopher Plummer. So it's Caine and Plummer in the train car, and essentially what's happened here is Michael Caine is a very amicable fellow, and he is striking up a conversation with a fellow Mason, telling him about his exploits and that he needs to meet a man in the South, but he needs to get word to him that he's going to meet him in a certain place, and that's where he asked Christopher Plummer to pass along the information because they're heading in the same direction. So Christopher Plummer says, sure, I can do that. He's supposed to look for, I think, a man in a white suit in a train car or something like that. It's kind of... because it's a little hard to suss out all the details through something Cockney accent.
Yeah, I had said to you guys, it's like I could follow A Clockwork Orange way easier. I guess... I didn't have the yarbles for this movie, I guess. But anyway, because it's like it had something to do with like Kipling was not coming back this way until 10 days, but Michael Caine talks him into coming back in 8 days. And because that they are both Masonic brothers, Kipling's like, sure, okay, fine. But then there was also there was another angle to that too that convinces Kipling to because
they said they were going to go there and claim the land, and we're going to say they were correspondents of the Northern Star, which
that's later. That's what Sean Connery. That's the second piece of the...
No.
Yeah, Sean Connery is the one who tells Kipling that they're going to blackmail like a local leader.
Well, he was yelling at Caine in the train that he couldn't be the Northern correspondent because
he was yelling at
Sean Connery.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it was Caine. Caine is the amicable one who talks him into.
Yes, he talks him into doing it.
Into going to meet with Connery. Connery is the one who's a little bit more devilish.
Yes, and he's like, since you're a friend of Peachy's Michael Caine. It's like, I don't mind telling you what their whole plan is.
Right.
And the whole plan, it actually does overlap into Kipling's role because they're going to impersonate essentially him. But they don't know that he is the person that they're going to impersonate in order to blackmail this leader.
Right. And so they're going to, and as they're running off, it's like, of course, Kipling's like, you can't do that. I'm the correspondent. And Sean Connery keeps saying, well, I'm sorry, I can't hear you. He doesn't care.
Yeah. And all of this sort of run up is a little bit just, it's not really all that important other than to establish who these people are. Because what ends up happening is Kipling intervenes in this locale where Peachy and Danny are gonna run this blackmail scheme, and they basically get caught. They should be going to jail, but Kipling also intervenes and says, you know what, maybe let's just deport them or something. Look at this. It's okay, they're Masons, and he explains a lot about the Masonry and why he wants to be loyal to his brothers and all that. And the guy, the magistrate or whatever of the commissioner of this area of this district, is kind of like, I don't understand all this mumbo jumbo crap, but you're a reputable person. I'll take you at your word. But then Peachy and Danny also kind of almost blow that whole thing up because they have information about the commissioner himself. Then they use the blackmail, or they threatened to use the blackmail against him. And the whole thing ends up with them just kind of being dismissed and being sent on their way. It's like, I don't ever want to see you in this area again. So what you've done is you've established, okay, these two guys, Peachy and Danny, are not really good guys, but they're kind of hilarious and they're con men.
They do have. We do find that they do have a code.
Yes,
which they are dishonorable men with an honorable code.
They're Steve Martin and Michael Caine in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I mean,
except for in this case, Michael Caine is Sean Connery.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
somebody draw that out on a chalkboard and try to figure that out. But okay.
They're former British soldiers. They're loyal in a lot of ways to the British way of thinking, of the British way of soldiering, of colonialism even. Definitely, actually.
They're also oddly worldly too.
Mm-hmm.
Where
they seem to be well educated, well spoken, even through their accents.
Which is well, I was going to say, which is funny because they're probably conscripted people who were probably not educated and thrown into the
Mm-hmm.
army instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But really what they're looking for is they're looking for just the next grift. They're grifters. They're not looking for anything, a reputable livelihood. They're looking for easy ways to make a quick buck, and that's their thing. So they concoct a scheme to go to this northern sort of remote area of Afghanistan called Kafiristan. I believe it's in like the northeastern tip of Afghanistan.
Is it Afghanistan or Pakistan?
I think it's Afghanistan. Sure.
Those countries are all like jammed together up there, so yeah, it probably is.
But supposedly this part of the country, this part of the world hasn't really been explored since the days of Alexander. It's very hard to get to, but they've heard tales that if they can essentially kind of establish themselves as sort of protectors or essentially, I guess, protectors, to go in there and say, okay, we're going to establish ourselves as these sort of ruler type figures, that their superior intellect and superior form of fighting will allow them to take over this land and become kings. That's kind of their goal. And what they've done then is they've created a contract, which is this funny scene where they meet up at the Northern Star again, where Rudyard Kipling works, and they have a contract that says they're not going to drink any hard spirits, they're not going to be with any women until they've established their goals, and if one of them is in trouble, the other one won't abandon them, and as long as they've met their goals, which is to become kings of Kafiristan. Pretty ambitious idea. Pretty
quick way to make a buck, right?
Yeah, right. Quick way to make a buck. They feel like if they can just get there with 20 rifles, they can make this happen. And of course, Kipling thinks they're mad. It's like, this is just crazy idea. I don't know what you're thinking. He doesn't really think they'll end up doing it.
Well, there was also a concern that plenty of British people have gone to Kafiristan. None of them have returned.
Right. Yeah. Which we get a little bit of why later. But so then the next part of the the movie essentially is them, trying to get to Kafiristan, right? So this is sort of your Lawrence in the desert
Well,
sequence, right?
before that, Plummer or Kipling has to meet them, right? He's being transported by, I don't know, he
Oh,
making
they
somewhere.
asked him if they would send him off. Yeah, if he would send them off,
Well,
and
it's
he meets them.
important. It's important because um,
Oh, that's
he
true. It
gives
is
David
important.
Dravitt the uh, the eye symbol from his Mason, whatever, I don't know what that's called, but he gives him a
Right.
Mason trinket.
Yes,
Um,
yes. He gives him the medallion or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. That is important. As sort of a parting gift and a good luck gift from one Mason to another. Um, Kipling gives his that was on his watch, the little medallion of the masonry to Danny. Yeah, and
right.
Danny is so appreciative of that. I love the way that's shot, where he puts it in his palm and then he lifts it up and he grips it. He gives uh, Christopher Plummer a look that I would love to have received from Sean Connery in my lifetime. Just this total
He's like, "You're the
gratitude.
man now, dog."
Yeah, pretty much.
There are a lot of things in next week's movie I would not want to get from Sean Connery.
Oh man.
But there's a funny, I don't know, maybe it's the way this was written or the language of the time, but when Michael Caine stops Rudyard Kipling from going, whoever his driver is, yeah, like the way he talks about what's going to happen to him, and he's like, to entice this sahib into a naughty house of disreputation, where he will be, where he will take you and kill you and murder you and cut your throat and rob the money from your pockets, sirs. And he's like, that sounds interesting. I don't know. At that point in this movie, I was like, what the hell is going on?
Oh, there's
I
another part.
was already there before that, Chuck. So as you know, I was like, "What is going on? What is this?"
There.
There's another great moment in that scene where Kipling sees them off. So you have Sean Connery. Danny. He's dressed as a kind of like a shaman of sorts.
Yeah.
And they've been running this scam, and they're going to run this scam in the caravan north, where Danny is a mad witch, essentially, like I forget what he calls himself, but and Michael Caine, Peachy, is going to be kind of his translator to them, and he's got this whole routine he's really proud of, and he wants to show it to Rudyard Kipling, and Kipling's like, "That's okay, I don't need to see it," and it sort of offends Peachy. The look on his face is kind of exasperated, like, "Well, another time then." But then he redeems it with the medallion.
Yes.
Okay, so they're in the caravan, and they're doing their sort of con, just to kind of ingratiate themselves to the caravan with the mad priest and the translator, and eventually they part ways, and then it's one of the weirdest kind of, I don't know, weirdest, but it's one of the scenes that I always was confused by as a kid. And every time I watch this movie, I get confused again, and then realize, oh, it's not that confusing. But it's when he's sitting, they're sitting in their camp, right? And they
After
don't
they
have,
cross the river and they're drying their clothes and stuff.
yeah, after they cross
Yeah.
the river, because they had to float all of their ammunition and guns and everything down the river, and they don't have any mode of transportation other than their feet. So they're like, how are we going to haul this crap, right? So they're drying out, and they see what is it? Five
Five
Afghans, 5 Afghanis, 3 mules, and they're like, how do we separate 5 Afghanis from 3 mules and be left over with 2 Englishmen? Which I always love that. And Michael Caine's like, I got it. So Peachy sits down, and he's got this bag of something. It's like, I don't know, some type of food, and and he acts like he's eating this food, but he also slips a bullet into his mouth. And for whatever reason, I always think the scene's going to go a different way. I've seen this movie so many times, but I always forget. I always think it's going to be like the scene where he's going to con them into thinking that he's actually eating bullets and that he's some sort of tough guy, right? That's not how it is at all.
No.
He just spits the bullet into the fire while he's eating the other things to kind of give them to not tip that off. And then the bullet, when it explodes in the fire, acts as a diversion, and then they pick up their rifles and they're able to take over the Afghanis. This kind of reminds me a little bit of the scene in Lawrence of Arabia around the water hole, where Lawrence is trying to get to the water, and he's being accosted by the Arabs in the area, and then I believe it's I forget which one who comes. It's not Anthony Quinn, but the other one who comes and kind of saves them and shoots them dead from like a really long way away, and saves Lawrence. But also Lawrence is in trouble at that point. But anyway, I digress. It just reminds me of a similar scene. But now they've got their mules, so kicking ass. They're making their way north. This was the first movie where I learned about snow blindness. I'd never heard about this before, and it like really terrified me. So Danny goes snowblind, and he's got bandages across his face, and I remember thinking, is he actually blind forever? That sucks, But really, it's just kind of, you could, I think, go permanently blind.
You can. I mean, every time you go out, like anytime you go outside during the day when there's snow, you get a little bit of that effect. Imagine that never going away. You never can go inside. It's bad. I mean, like, shit, there are times I go and get the mail in the wintertime, and it's like, I can't see for like an hour afterwards, even when I've come back inside. It's so bright.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's terrifying.
Just give me a call, Jeff. I'll lead you and the mule inside.
Oh, the mules have already died.
Well, there's one left. There's one
left.
Okay.
Well, but she's not going to last that long.
No, she's not. I like the way that Michael Caine orates this stuff through this scene, where he's like, well, we had 3 and then there were 2 and then she was left, but she dies later.
Yeah, she dies later. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's interesting too, because apparently the novella is essentially narrated by Kipling, even though it's not. He doesn't name himself, but it's essentially so it's kind of interesting. You still give Michael Caine the opportunity to narrate what he saw and what was going on, but he narrates it in the third person, which I find interesting.
He calls himself Peachy a lot.
But also, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because at the time that the present is, when he's telling the story, he is no longer the man he was.
No, exactly. So it's congruent or whatever throughout the whole story, that he's referring to himself, but he is someone else, kind of.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's the scene where they cross over an ice bridge, and they realize then after they cross the bridge that there was no way to get across this further crevasse.
And their bridge,
and the ice bridge behind them collapsed, so they're trapped essentially on a block of ice, really, that they can't get off of, and so they're done for. What does he say? We're done coming and going.
Right.
So they set up a little campfire underneath an ice overhang, and they start to discuss pretty rationally, pretty matter of factly, that this is it for us. This is the end of the road. We're gonna die. When this fire runs out, Peachy says he'll do the necessary, which is essentially gonna kill them, because they're gonna freeze or starve to death otherwise. And then they have a kind of a reminiscing about, did they waste their lives? That's what Sean Connery, Danny, asked the question. Did we waste our lives? And Danny tries to kind of reassure him with, no, we maybe aren't good. We maybe didn't add anything to this world. We didn't give anything back, but I think we led we led interesting lives. We saw the world. We have memories that I wouldn't trade for anything. And Danny agrees. And then they start kind of talking about a past thing that they remembered that was particularly humorous, and they start to laugh very, very loudly. And that laughter causes an avalanche, and avalanche comes down through the crevasse and fills it. And then they're able to cross.
Which they had said previously, because at some point, one of them was
Connery was singing.
Connery was singing, and Kane was like, "Stop it! You're going to cause an avalanche." And Connery's like, "That's bull." You know, it's like that doesn't happen. That's an old wives' tale, basically. But then it happens.
That's interesting too, because they set Connery up as kind of a skeptic, and Kane is not really a skeptic. I mean, it's not gone into heavily, but that's their role, right? Connery is a non-believer in a lot of things. And I also found it interesting when they were talking at that, their best memories were all of other people. Mm-hmm. Like the stuff that Kane was saying that like made them live a good life was seen through other people's eyes almost. It's kind of funny at this point. But Go ahead. The skeptic part was yeah, I thought.
Yeah, that's a great note. I think it's interesting here too that they've had this moment to really reflect on the meaning of their life, and they kind of have failed upward in that this has allowed them to cross the crevasse, and instead of maybe learning a lesson at this point and rethinking what they're doing, they decide to forge ahead.
Yeah, it reinforces it for them somehow. Yeah.
Yep. Which again will be to their detriment. So they do finally kind of get where they're going. They see two giant stone statues or wood statues in the snow, and at first I think they're real people, but they're not. And they're like, "Oh, this is a sign of civilization. I think we've reached our destination." And they move forward. And then they kind of the weather improves where they are, and they're up on kind of a ridge and looking down at a river or a creek bed, and there are women and children that are doing laundry and things in the creek bed in the river, and they're attacked by bandits. So they're like, all right, this is our opportunity to insert ourselves into the narrative and to show that we are saviors. And they pull out their rifles and they shoot many of these men off their horses and essentially save the women, and they capture one. So they capture this one bandit. They take him up the hill to the village, basically. Like it's sort of this stone castle built into the mountain. And the idea here is to take this prisoner to the leader of these people who were attacked and say, hey, we can help you to conquer your enemies, right? And this is, I think, is where things start to make a little more sense for Jeff.
Yeah, it does. Because at this point in time, you learn what these bandits do, which are they take the women, they kill guys, they're real trouble around here, and it makes daily living terrifying for them. Now, we also have Billy Fish in this. Billy Fish is the interpreter. Mm-hmm. And he's telling, he's translating everything, and the leader of this town, Uta, he is he wants to be known as the worst of the worst. He wants to be Uta the Terrible.
The Terrible.
Yeah, because he wants to strike fear into. Now he sees himself as the opportunity of striking fear into others, and which would this is very protection through being able to cast fear. And it's kind of interesting because it's a very questionable take on how people who live out in the middle of nowhere would really think, but in a lot of ways, though, I mean, this guy who is the leader of these people who have constantly had to deal with these other people invading them, he now has the opportunity to inflict pain on others.
Right,
And it does not treat him well to do that.
No, they show him too as kind of a fearful guy in the beginning. He's kind of a, he's hiding behind a door. He comes out real slowly. There's more to this later when they actually go to the first battle, but he's a very, I don't know, he wants to be Uta the Terrible, but he's really a scared little shit.
He's Uta the Meek.
Yeah. But it's funny too, because every town is the enemy of every town. There are no friends in this area.
Right.
And then there's a funny joke.
They're all pissing upstream downstream while the others bathe. Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
Every single one of them.
Basically, it's every town in the United Kingdom during soccer season. Everybody hates everybody.
Fair.
So what we're really starting to delve into here is some really heavy Rudyard Kipling themes. Rudyard Kipling, again, was a colonial imperialist. He believed that civilization must be brought to the uncivilized. And a lot of times the uncivilized meant those people who weren't white. So what you have now is a little bit of those reinforcing of those themes. It's the way that the Afghanis are portrayed are as savages, are as beasts. They really, there is no good or bad. They're just all different groups of people who fight with one another.
But also because we live in one camp in particular, most of them look frail. They look undernourished. They look stupid.
There are no young people.
There are no young people. They're all old, skinny, and stupid.
Yep.
Yeah. Because at one point Connery says that man with the size 5 hat, or the hat size of 5, was going to be the greatest hero of this town. Or
yeah.
Which is not a good thing, because if you bring into the idea of whatever they call that when they measure the size of people's heads, a size 5 hat is really small. He's calling him a dullard. Yeah.
But this is where I feel this movie and Lawrence of Arabia really start to tell a similar story, because it's about conquering but uniting these people, right? And there's a lot of hubris, and there's a lot of white man's hubris, that if I bring all of these civilized techniques of military, of decorum, of law and order, that I can tame these people and make them civilized, right? It's what Lawrence did in Arabia, and it's what Michael Caine, Peachy and Danny are going to try and do in Afghanistan here. It's not all that different a story, and what Kipling has so deftly in his writings kind of done is, while he believes, he believes it. He never outright said it, but I do believe he believes in a white superiority. He definitely believed in a British superiority. He also was very cautious to people who would be colonialists, who would be bringing what he called the white man's burden, of taking civilization to uncivilized lands. He cautioned that, you may not get the results you expect. You may have pure intentions, but your intentions can be corrupted to your detriment, to their detriment, to the world's detriment. It's interesting, his poem, The White Man's Burden, has been used by both sides of the imperial colonialist argument, both for and against it, which I find to be fascinating, right? Because of the fact that it is so counter-argumentative with itself, because it definitely points out all the pitfalls. And if you are not men of honor, of men of good intention, then you will end up becoming, absolute power essentially corrupts absolutely, which is what we end up seeing here.
Yeah, it's a purity test, right?
Yeah.
It's and I wonder also if maybe some of this is that this isn't the entirety of the British forces or the British Empire coming into this place. It's two guys who already have questionable morals.
Right.
They may be honorable to one another, but they're questionable people, and there's such a small few of them. It's very easy for that to go wrong.
Yeah. To me, I think that the Peachy and Danny represent the worst ideals of imperialism and the white man's burden, right? It's the total corruption of that idea. Now, one would argue that idea is inherently corrupt, right? But Kipling wouldn't argue that. He would argue that this is what it could turn into, and what happens from here on, I think, is the cautionary tale of British imperialism, essentially.
Well, I think that contract that they write up in the beginning is somewhat of the way that Rudyard Kipling is saying you'd have to behave to take over in a pure way. And these two men have to force themselves to follow these rules, or try to force themselves to follow these contracts.
And it almost feels a bit of a justification, right? It's like if we are able to show restraint in these ways, then we can justify pulling off this con on these people. Yeah. Yep.
Real quick here, I was just kind of looking at this. Do you know that originally, so this many times over, John Huston tried to make this movie.
Huh.
Yeah, for like 30 years,
yeah,
I think.
The first time in the 50s with Clark Gable and Humphrey Bogart.
Oh, interesting.
Which I think that could have worked. I think that could have worked out really well.
Absolutely would have worked. Yeah.
He was unable to get it off the ground before Bogart died in 57. Gable then died in 60. So the next two people were Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas. Again, I think a pretty good coupling. And then Richard Burton and Peter O'Toole.
Interesting.
And then in the 70s, Robert Redford and Paul Newman.
Man.
I'm happy with the two they got, though.
Well, Newman said, "Hey, John, you better get some British actors for this."
Yeah.
and it was Paul Newman who said Sean Connery and Michael Caine would be the two that you need. So
That's
anyway,
funny.
I just wanted to interject that because I didn't read about that last night until just now. It's like,
I never knew that.
John
That is
Huston
so
was
funny.
obsessed with this story. So yeah.
So he read this story as a child, yeah.
Or it was, the substitute teacher put it on before Christmas break, and it's like, all right, kids, we're gonna watch this movie.
When he was,
don't ask me how that works. I just think that's what happened.
woo.
All right. So what happens? What happens next?
They go on a conquering spree. They train the people. We do also get our first taste of the holy men who travel the lands. But
this whole scene is very important. Yeah.
They travel with their eyes covered because they want to see no evil or see no badness.
Yep. Yeah, so they're it's like essentially the first big battle is when they see the holy men, and the whole they're about to fight, and then everybody stops and is silent and gets down on their
it's
knees.
The only thing that everybody agrees upon is that the whatever the religion is or whatever these holy men do, it is above them.
Right. But then as soon as the holy men pass, it's back to battle.
It's wartime, man.
It's wartime. So what we have is Danny and Peachy's trained village of really ragamuffins against, I think they even say like 10-1 odds or something like that.
But the ragamuffins have what?
They've got rifles.
Yeah.
They sure do. And that
tends to be the difference in these times is whoever has got the things that project things better. And that can kill more people.
Chuck, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. As we talk about next week, when you show up to a knife fight, you should bring a gun.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what's happening here.
Yeah, except for Connery's not calling anybody a dago in this scene.
No, not exactly.
Connery's hubris gets the best of him in that one too.
It sure does.
Yeah.
So then what happens here is really important. There's an arrow that flies from the village that they're attacking, and it gets Connery right in the chest. And it's sticking out of him, but it doesn't seem to affect him. And he keeps on fighting, and he's just like mowing people down with his saber. And eventually the village, the people that they're fighting see this, and they're just kind of amazed, and they decide to surrender. They all get down on their knees and they surrender.
They completely and totally postulate themselves by laying flat on the ground on their chest.
All while Uta is hiding.
Yes, much the same as they do when the holy people pass.
Yes.
And then they're like, well, what's this all about? And then they realize, oh, there's an arrow that's sticking out of you. And all the while, see, this is one thing. Connery, Danny had broken ranks. He sent the cavalry in when before Peachy had ordered them to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a little bit of a mess, but they got lucky.
Yep.
But the reason why it's not affecting Danny is that he's wearing a leather bandolier underneath his coat, and it happened to strike that. So it never actually pierced anything except for his coat.
Yep.
Yeah.
And now all of the Afghanis in the area, both the ones that they've trained and the one that they've conquered here, are starting to believe that that Danny specifically is a god.
Sikander.
Yes, Sikander specifically, who is Sikander is Alexander the Great, and is the son of Alexander, is who they think he is, because there's a legend in the area going back to like 328 BC that Alexander, after he left, was going to send a son, which is very much like the Christ myth, right?
Yep.
And that this is the son of Alexander, Sikander the second, or son of Sikander, as they call him.
Yeah.
And it's weird at this point, Danny wants to dispel that myth. He's saying, we should tell them that I'm not a god. And Peachy's like, no, that we can really use this to our benefit.
Yep. Let's exploit this idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's like, well, what if they find out? And he's like, well, we're not going to tell them. Are you going to tell them, Billy Fish? And he's like, nope.
Billy Fish is just happy to have a job.
I love Billy Fish.
He's along for the ride, man. Yeah. He loves it.
He will translate anything for you.
Well, he's become dedicated to the man, not the myth, which is kind of
well,
cool.
it's also important too that first Uta's clan also remains loyal to the man, not the myth.
Yes,
as we find out later. But it's almost as if they have completely and totally subsumed that first group into their con.
Yeah, but Danny and Peachy also are still trying to do things morally and non-barbarically, because Utah is going to behead a bunch of people, and they're like, no, we don't do that here. And
they also play polo with their defeated people's heads.
Right. Yes, they end up the people end up killing Utah and playing polo with his head.
Yeah. But Utah was kind of a useful idiot, and he's out of the way. So now they've taken over Utah's city or whatever. He's kind of out of the way. He was a little bit of a. I looked at him as a little bit of a liability, and they probably did too.
Yeah, I don't think they had any. They were not upset at all that Utah was out of the way at that point. They had nothing to do with it, really. But
Utah was also like trying to take credit for the victory, and Connery's like, "Well, I didn't see you out there."
Right.
Yep.
But that was their whole idea, was to take Utah, I think, originally, and make him the king, and then subvert him so they could take power. And it happened way earlier for them than they originally planned.
But their army is now much larger than it was, so good for them. It all worked out in the end. Now this is where they go on the string, where basically they take over the entire nation that was Kafiristan.
His legend had spread, and there were no more battles. They would just show up at a town, and everyone would give them gifts. And I don't think I'm skipping anything here. It was basically
told by Peachy. It's like, battle led to battle, but then it wasn't a battle anymore.
Yeah, and they show up at this town, and everyone's giving them gifts, and a woman shows up.
Yes,
right?
Shakira Kane.
Shakira Kane, is she a famous...
Yeah, she's married. She was married to
Michael Caine.
She is still married to Michael Caine.
To this day.
Oh, wow, I had no idea. That's awesome.
Yep. Well, originally it was meant to be, here's another one. It was originally meant to be Tessa Dahl, which is Roald Dahl's
daughter.
But then she was not... Huston said they should probably keep with somebody who's a little brown. Maybe that might be a good idea. Which is kind of funny to think that 45 years ago somebody's thinking like that.
That we weren't whitewashing cinema.
Right. And it's like, apparently he said to Michael Caine, we've got to find an Arab princess somewhere. And Michael Caine's like, well, my wife Shakira, who's right here at the table with us at dinner, she's available. So she took it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
There's a few things before we get into the final act that I want to point out that I find just funny lines, funny moments along the way as they've conquered that I think really points out some of the satire, and again some of that double-sided coin of Kipling's White Man's Burden. So you've got the scene where after they ingratiate themselves with Utah, right, where he is offering them women and boys and all of these things, and they both are
there's 29 daughters and 22 sons or something like that.
Both Peachy and Danny are and what's the right word? Outraged in different ways about these different customs, and they're using each other's words against them about, hey, it's a different country, different customs. Don't get so.
Don't be prejudiced. Is what they say.
Don't be so prejudiced. That's what Danny says, right? Yeah, exactly. They're only being hospitable in their own way. So there's something about that, right, where the customs of the conquering land can be equally uncivilized but yet helpful, or exploited, right? And this idea that you're bringing civilization, but yet when it's maybe a custom that you find appealing, you could just write it off to different customs, different lands. But in other regards, it might be something that you feel needs to be brought into order and law, right? So it's just this hypocrisy, right? And then you've got some lines I really like about just general warfare, where I think as Michael Caine says, we're going to teach you the noblest British soldiering, so you can slaughter your enemies like civilized men.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then there's another line later where Michael Caine is tempted by a woman who wants to has been sent to him, I believe, right? And he gets caught by Danny right before they might have gotten into some sexy times. And Michael Caine is like, oh, thank God. Let's go seek the safety of battle.
They also, they're not entirely they're not mistreating these people necessarily. They are teaching them to build bridges, build roads, be more industrious, I guess is the right word. They are teaching them how to protect themselves. Now, of course, unfortunately, that's going to get used against them. But and they are also trying to bring a sense of justice to them. Now, of course, the back end of that argument is that it seems presumptuous that it requires somebody from the West to teach somebody else how to do justice when, oh gosh, the Brits were pretty fucking terrible when they would conquer people. Particularly in that area too. Of that area was terror. They were terrible to people back then.
That's how you create subservience, though, so you can carry out your nefarious goals or whatever.
Right.
I don't know, but yeah, what happens? He kind of falls in love. They find out that the girl's name is Roxanne, right?
Which was Alexander's wife's name.
Alexander's wife's name. So at this point, Danny's kind of got a glimmer in his eye. You know, he's not quite there where he will be later in the story, but he's starting to feel above their contract at this point.
And Peachy is intuitively spotting this.
Right. Yes, he's totally getting it. But while they're receiving their gifts at this town, the eyes closed religious people. I don't know if they have a specific name. I don't know if they're ever named as a group in the movie, but
they are.
I thought they were too. Keep going. I'm looking for it.
Yeah, they come and I'll say request, but they basically demand at this point that the son of Alexander goes to this mountain city where the highest, holiest of holies is, and I don't remember his name, Kepher or something like that. And they're kind of like, well, you know, tell him to lay back. We'll show up tomorrow. And they're like, no, he means come now. You have to come now. And Danny starts to get a little irritated. Like, hey, I'm the boss here. I'll decide when to go. And Kane or Peachy, you know, studiously points out or observantly points out that, hey, we're at risk of losing the people that are already following us if we don't go do this thing now. So just smile and look pretty, you know?
Yeah, no, it doesn't. I can't find where it said, but yeah, basically the high priest is like, you got to come here. They want to set up a reenactment of the Arrow incident, to which Connery's like, no, sir, I'm not interested in this. And of course, you know, Peachy's like, now he's kind of stuck. He doesn't really know how to get his friend out of this. But they tear open his shirt and they see the medallion. And you know, it is the 70s. So of course that medallion is nested in a lot of chest hair. But it's the Masonic, which is a symbol that was the all-seeing eye of God, is kind of a symbol of Alexander also. And so they were like, hey, this guy's the real thing. He's the son of Sikander. And
it's not just that he has a symbol. It's that the symbol is etched in stone or something,
and only known by which is funny because
only known by the highest priest of the order. The
fact that these people are so uncivilized, I'm doing in air quotes, they don't know that the symbol is used everywhere, throughout the known world at this point.
Right.
Well, their worldview is very small.
So now they show him.
I want to say really quickly when they get to Sikander City or whatever it's called.
Sikander Goal.
Thank you. Sean Connery says or calls it God's holy trousers, which kills me.
Yeah.
With awe, he says God's holy trousers.
So at this point they're like, hey, let us show you all of the treasures that belong to you. And it's just a room full of jewels and gold. And at this point, Peachy is now like, let's just load our pockets and beat cheeks.
Yeah, can we take it? Here. Ask them if we could take it.
Yeah, and it's like, I think we've now gone to the limit of proving, quote, air quotes, that you are this powerful being. It's time to go. We have to go. And like, Danny's like, no, no. It's
Well,
like,
Danny's they have to wait 4 months because of the weather.
right. And but like, yeah, because like he right. And all this time, now Danny is like, he's starting to pass along laws. He's doing all of these things. He asks Peachy to bow. It's like, if we're really going to pass this thing off like I'm a god, you need to do what everybody else is doing. You're not. And it's like, at this point, Peachy's kind of like, well, you're kind of right, but we got to go, man. It's like,
Michael Caine is really good in this stuff. Like, his skeptical, like, he's keeping the peace with him and Danny, but he's also starting to get wary of Danny. And he knows the jig is going to be up. At some point,
the clock is ticking.
Yeah, but they still have to wait because of weather.
Right. And what's the one key thing that they have to prevent Sean Connery from doing?
Having sex with a woman or getting injured.
Well, yeah, he can't bleed. Anytime that he bleeds, the jig is up. And do you know how often it is that somebody bleeds? I bleed a lot. All the time, it's like,
that's Sean Connery, though.
Well, true. He is made of the richest of deep leather.
Yes.
And in the meantime, too, he's really leaning into this God thing. I mean, he's holding
digging
court. He's holding court on a throne. The people are coming to him to settle disputes. He's creating laws and proclamations.
I do like some of his verdicts he gives them.
Yeah. He's starting to believe he's doing good, though.
Yeah.
So he thinks he can make a difference. Yep. He's really buying into the white man's burden here. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's interesting too that Peachy's way smarter than him. That's obvious, right? It's not just me that thinks that, because every time he tries to do math, Peachy has to correct him or finish his math. Like, he always has to give him that last bit of info that he doesn't have to make a decision, it seems like. But the math with the cows in the is just so funny.
Yeah. But I also, like he also establishes the idea. It's like, well, there's one of our cities is suffering, so everybody should chip in, and then it will be doled out, based on what each, underproduction needs are. And people seem to appreciate that. People seem to, I mean, that guy was pretty happy that he was going to get some food or something. But it's not, again, it's not like he is there to twist his gold. By the way, he's given not only a crown, but a golden arrow as his, symbology. He's not there to twist that arrow into anybody to make them serve him. He's just saying, hey, let's do these things and it will be good for everybody. And for the most part, they seem appreciative of it. But the concern is that if he kisses a woman or if he has sex with a woman, she will burn to a goddamn crisp, and that
it would be nothing
terrifying.
left of her.
Right.
Nothing left of her if he has sex with her.
Right. Which is, which, I mean, it's just, apparently they have not heard of the Greek pantheon of gods. They had sex with all sorts of mortals all the time. And obviously, all of the Western gods have always had some sort of human, good times.
Yeah.
Human good times.
But at this point, now it's getting to go time. And Peachy is counting his money. He's getting ready to leave. And he goes to Danny, who's like, nope, I can't go. I cannot go. I'm going to stay. I can't remember the reasons he gives, but it's basically
he wants to go meet Queen Victoria as an equal. Yes,
he does. So he tells the holy people there that he wants to be brought a woman, a specific woman, Roxanne from the other town, to marry her. To which they're all like, no, like you can't do this. And he has kind of a tirade, like, no, you will bring me this woman, and they decide to let the higher god decide, if he's really a god. And we find out that cows are drying up, crops are not, or corn is popping early, like all sorts of
famine, pestilence, and disease.
Yes, biblical references there.
Yep.
And Peachy's like, we got to get the hell out of here, man. And he's like, nope.
Because his idea is that between he and Roxanne, there will always be a king to pass along through. Again, it's a little bit of that imperialism, but he's setting up what he is best suited to remember, to know about, which is a monarchy.
Yeah, a lineage. Yep.
Yeah, and so but the thing is like, and I think a lot of this, all the biblical things are showing up, but they're not necessarily biblically caused. It's that these are the things that he wouldn't know anything about. He wouldn't know farming. He wouldn't know these types of, he doesn't know what keeps cattle alive in this area for how that, but he's passed down the laws based on what he does know or what he thinks is right. And it's starting to hurt people, but not on purpose. He just doesn't know.
Right.
But he's so wrapped up in the idea that people, worship him either as a king or a god, depending on which town. But Peachy's like, we've got maybe a few more weeks before they're done with your shit. We got to go. And it's like, might as well go now.
Yeah, but he's not having it. He is, at this point, grandeur has deluded him. And he truly believes that, to some degree, that maybe he is a god. I even think, he's become just drunk on this feeling of power and worship. So he's going to see this thing through. And he asked Peachy to stick around for the wedding as a favor to him for good time's sake or something, or time's sake.
Walk me down the aisle for good old time's sake or something.
And Peachy, you can tell, doesn't want to, but is going to acquiesce to this request from his last request from this friend. So he does, and he shows up in his military reds and everything for the wedding. So the wedding happens. Roxanne is presented. She's on the verge of fainting, basically, because she's terrified of what's going to happen to her. Everybody's there. There's thousands of people there. And he basically marries himself to her, which is hilarious, and goes to kiss her. And when he does, she bites him. And when she bites him, he bleeds. His cheeks.
You bit me, the slut.
The slut. Yeah. and pushes her to the ground. And it's like, oh shit, this is it. This is everything they feared, and on a public stage, right?
Right.
And he's done it to himself. So what the high priest, he sees the blood, he touches the blood, and he starts proclaiming that Sean Connery, that Danny is a man, and not a god. And people are kind of confused, and I like how it kind of takes a while for that message to trickle down the crowd, right? So they do their thing that they always do when they're in trouble. They kind of march, right? They stick their chest out and march. So the three of them, Danny, Peachy, and Billy Fish, they start to march out, and they get away from the crowd enough before the crowd starts to charge after them. Now Peachy had already been ready to go after the wedding, and he had his riflemen that he was going to take with him to help him, on his journey, because he had trained a little platoon of riflemen, and they're ready and waiting at the pack mules to go. So
and these are people, and they're all people from the first town, I think.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah, pretty sure there's original riflemen. So they're loyal to Peachy, and he gets them, and they also don't really know what the hell's going on. But he gives them an order, and they obey. So they start to fire on their probably their own people, to help
Well,
them
at
escape.
this point, they're one large. It's no longer a
Yeah,
collection of city states. It's one large nation now. And so,
right.
yeah, they are kind of fighting themselves.
hmm So they so they're, I mean, but you can tell that this isn't going to end well at this point. They're far outnumbered. They don't have nearly enough rifles or bullets to take down this mob of people that are after them. And that's eventually exactly what happens. They're surrounded. Billy Fish decides to charge into battle and sacrifice himself one last time to help them, maybe escape. The image of his bloody body, like kind of stripped a bit and being thrown up into the air above the crowd, has always been chilling to me from since I was a kid.
Right.
Ooh, poor Billy Fish. But they're captured. They're captured, and they decide to kill Danny in a very symbolic way. They have him march out to the middle of the rope bridge that he had Peachy build, which is, this sort of symbol of civilization, right? But that has been corrupted by the one who brought it. They put him in the middle, and they slash the rope ties, and he plunges to his death while he sings. The tune is from the Minstrel Boy, but in the movie they put different lyrics to it. You're in mute, Jeff.
The Son of God goes forth to war.
Yeah. The original lyrics are different. I actually learned that song in high school as well, the Minstrel Boy, which is kind of a weird confluence. But I've always loved that. It's kind of an Irish folk tune, drinking tune. But he plunges to his death, and at this point you flash forward, I guess, to Michael Caine in Kipling's office again. And if we hadn't mentioned it in the beginning, Michael Caine, as he's telling this story to Kipling in his office at the Northern Star newspaper, he's almost unrecognizable. He is unrecognizable.
Yeah, he is all
half
messed
his
up.
face is messed up. He's blind in one eye. He looks like a man probably 30 to 40 years older than he is.
He has a hunch in his back now. He drags one leg, although I think that one leg, I think he's missing a leg and has got like a wooden leg or something. But he also has like a crutch, but like, yeah, he is not good. He is not in good shape.
But he explains that after they killed Danny, he was strung up to be crucified.
Crucified between two trees.
Between two trees. And
two pine trees, in fact.
And he survived a day. And the people couldn't believe that he could have survived a day, and they considered it to be a miracle, and they decided to spare his life. So they let him go. And somehow, some way, he made his way back to India. And all along the way, he went down and he got the head of Danny with the crown and took him with him. And he explains that Danny was his guide on his way home to India, and he followed him, hand in hand, essentially.
Kind of creepy.
Really creepy.
Yeah. It's a hell of a way to end your probably G-rated movie. with a look at a fucking rotten corpse head.
Yeah, he leaves the head. He leaves the head for Rudyard Kipling, and then that's the last shot is of Danny's corpse head with the crown.
With the crown on it. Yeah.
Which is the final warning, right? Is that, riches, power, glory, all these things you may seek, you're still a man, and you're still going to die one day.
Yeah.
Yep. So there you go.
Yeah, that's the movie.
Yeah. It's interesting though. They kind of succeeded in their goal. They united these people, which was probably good for them overall, even after they left.
Well,
but the thing is, they united them against them.
Well, yeah, that's what usually. Yeah. I think it's a cautionary tale against uniting people, is that eventually they'll become against.
Pretty much everywhere that the British had set up a colony ended up uniting against them.
Yeah.
I mean,
You wonder though,
we're
because
people that are beneficiaries of that. I mean, for better or worse,
because in Lawrence of Arabia, it didn't go that way, right? He united the tribes of Arabia, and they were successful in defeating the Turks at Aqaba, and then realized that they had reached the mountaintop, and all he had done what he had set out to do, and united all of these tribes. But what ends up happening when they defeat their common enemy, they just end up devolving back into tribes again, and
tribalism.
fighting against one another while they split the spoils. So this so-called civilization that they were brought, which was really just a mirage of power, is going to then divide them again.
I was wondering the same thing at the end of this movie. What would happen to these people that were then united? Will they devolve? And I'm guessing they probably do, but who knows?
Yeah. Who knows?
Yeah, civilization is not all that it's cracked up to be. I mean, I think that's the moral of the story that we've learned, at least since the onset of the 20th century, right? Like, it's like whatever we deem, or whatever it's called, whatever you want to call it, the idea of civilization is going to vary from place to place and person to person, and it's being civilized is often used as a as a negative, as a way to throw negative connotation to somebody else that is an outsider. I suspect the Romans,
it's a way to enslave,
right?
Yeah.
I suspect the Romans thought that the Germanic tribes were uncivilized until they defeated the Romans. And the Germanic tribes probably thought that the Romans were just garbage people in their own right, and so it's I mean, it's a kind of a meaningless term, really.
Well, yeah, you've got, civilizations have fallen and will continue to fall as long as mankind exists and creates them. I mean, democracies fall, empires fall. It's just maybe some are slower than others. I mean, I believe our democracy, our country is splintering. The civilization that we've created in America is changing every day, and in different ways that don't make everybody happy in it. And that's kind of the nature of the social bargain, right? Is that not everybody's happy, but there should be like a common bar, I guess, like any contract, all parties should be getting something out of the deal. And I feel like we're in a situation now in our civilization that not everybody is feeling like they're getting the better end of the deal.
Right.
And that's happening on both sides, on two sides of two factions. And that's how civilizations start to fracture and fail. And it can happen over centuries. It can happen, over decades.
Right. And really what you say is, what you say is fracturing or failing may not really be a negative thing. It may just transform. It may be just transformative. After all, the United States is what was the nickname? The Great Experiment. Experiments end eventually. And then it takes on something else and it becomes something else. I mean, the UK, the United Kingdom, is no longer the empire it once was, but that's not to say that it's bad. It's not a bad place. They took what they learned and,
Yeah, I think in America, a lot of the problem is, like you said, that it's transformative, right? These civilizations will transform. Well, on both sides, there are people that are very fearful of what that transformation will be.
Yeah.
And they're all arguing against that transformation. Like, we can't allow this to happen because X. I don't want to get into it too.
No. You bring up a good point though, because it creates stagnation, right? So stagnation then is when things will transform negatively.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, then that's when you have sort of some of the dangers of people who interpret laws based on the time when they were written and not allowing themselves to evolve to understand how these laws should be applied justly in today's climate, in today's society.
Yeah, they don't contextually always take into account what the law was originally designed for.
It's almost like, don't you think that it's a little bit of a lack of imagination to even be able to take this concept and extrapolate it to something else? It's almost like it's almost like they have to be pedantic about it so much, where it's like, well, but that doesn't really work. It's like there's a lot of old laws on the books that can't be enforced today in every state. Every state has those weirdo list of old laws that
you can't walk down the street backwards eating a pickle.
Yeah.
Law somewhere, like, legitimately.
Yeah. It's like, well, that seems like a waste of taxpayers' money to spend a day arguing and voting over that fucking bill, or whatever. But still, I mean, but like, we do have the imagination to say there's nothing wrong with it. That's a useless old law that nobody's gonna, who cares, right? But so you can't extrapolate that. But it's, if you don't have that way, if you don't have a broader sense of thinking, doesn't really work out for you. And to kind of tie that back to this movie, I think Peachy had that broader sense of imagination and know when the time, the jig is up.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but
those were his exact words, I believe.
Yeah.
I think
his failing was honoring the contract.
Yeah.
Whereas Danny's failing was not honoring the contract. It's kind of interesting the way that they're played against each other, and Danny who is originally the skeptic, becomes a god himself.
Believes his own bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start smelling his own farts and liking it.
Yeah, for all its, I think the fact that it was funny throughout is what carries this film and makes those broader ideas easier to handle, I guess, or think about. It's almost Vonnegut-like, and we're going to place humor on these huge ideas to make them more palatable. Yep. If this was a serious film, I don't think I would like it at all.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah, I admit
the playfulness of it makes it engaging. For sure.
Yeah, I was struggling a little bit with the tone because I was trying to figure out, it's like, is this actually a comedy? Is it an adventure? Is it a drama? Well, it's a little bit of all these things, and I didn't realize it until I got to the end. It's like, okay. And then talking about it, it's like, I do get it a little bit more. I just found it, its pacing and its tone was difficult for me at the beginning, but then once it settled, and now we've got a clear, like all the dust settled, and now we've got a clear lane that this movie is going to settle into, then that's when I started kind of getting it.
Yeah, it was that first act for you. It sounds like it just took some acclimating.
Yeah, plus I was, hopped up on Dayquil and and Robitussin and stuff, and I'm like, what's going on? It's like there were just little things that I was just missing that was all the connective tissue. Chuck helped out with a little bit of it, and then this discussion helped out with the rest of it.
Yeah, I think this film landed for me, like you had said. That first act was just a little frenetic. It was a little all over the place. It was moving really fast, and just digestion was kind of hard.
Well, it was moving fast, but it was also slow.
Yeah, I guess I get that too.
Yeah.
But by the end, once, like you said, the dust settled and everything could be sussed out, I was like, okay, I appreciate this film. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I mean, that was the two notes I made was, what is this movie and why did you bring this to us? Because I was curious, because it is something like, I also admit that it's like, I'm not huge on Kipling stuff. I don't really care about the Jungle Book. I don't, what else has he done? I don't know. And I don't really care, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that this movie does not have some value to it to other people. And that's why I was really curious why you chose, because you were like, no doubt, no bones about it. We're going to talk about a couple of Connery movies. This is the one right here. And
Yeah,
then meanwhile,
yeah,
next week I was like, this is the one right here, and it's like neither one of them are Bond movies, and it's like, but but at the same time, it's like when we were talking about Connery, we each went direct to two different nostalgia points, I think. But yeah, anyway.
yeah.
But yeah, I was just kind of curious about your background with this, because it's like I said, it's like I knew the title, but I knew nothing about it. In fact, I thought it was an older movie than 1975.
Oh, interesting.
I think the reason why was because I think I was, for some reason, getting it confused with A Man for All Seasons.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
But I don't know why. I don't know why I confused those two. But anyway,
That's one I grew up with as well. But
oh my God, now we're gonna have to watch that. Sorry, Chuck, I did it. I stepped in it.
I don't have a ton of nostalgia for that one.
No, it's all right. I was just kidding.
I don't have anything else to say about this
No, me
movie.
neither.
No, it's I definitely appreciate like top tier, like Michael Caine being Michael Caine. And it was really nice because the only, aside from the 00 Saturdays where I did, all the Bond films where I was really living in it for a while with Connery for the first part of 2020. Other than that, the only other thing that Jason and I talked about in the show before was Zardoz, which did not look like a hugely fun time for Connery. This looked like he was having a blast.
Oh yeah.
And
I think I've read that Connery and Caine consider this both of their favorite movies they've ever been a part of.
Yeah.
At
They're
least
good friends too, right?
Yeah.
I think they're good friends.
They are.
Which is interesting because Michael Caine and Roger Moore grew up together.
Oh wow.
Yeah. They were street urchins in London, or not urchins. You know what I mean? They were just like I think they grew up together. Anyway, yeah.
What do we have next week?
Whoa, boy. It's my turn to talk about Connery. The final, like the last kind of legendary, kind of mythological crime versus law, criminal versus lawman story in American history, and the wonderful film that Brian De Palma made for it, The Untouchables.
Yes.
Yeah, this is going to be a good one because holy shit, the cast in it's great.
Mm-hmm.
You can watch Robert De Niro scenes and learn how to be a mob boss for anything that you ever want to make later, or any part that you might play where you're a mob guy. Yeah, just watch Robert De Niro. Because he is over the top, and it's great. But yeah, this is Sean Connery's Oscar, and well deserved.
Yep.
So so that's next week. Also next week on the old Monster Mondays, I've got the 1953 classic Invaders from Mars.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's a fun one. That's a fun one.
That's the one that Joe Dante eventually remade, didn't he? Invaders from Mars?
Wasn't Joe Dante.
Wasn't Joe Dante?
It was Toby Hooper.
Toby Hooper. Thank you.
Yeah, that was one of his canon movies.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do that this upcoming Friday. If you go over to my website, bmovieenema.com, I am talking about the movie Femalien.
Oh man, that's a blast from the Skinamax past.
Yeah, it's better than Beach Babes 2. It's not as good as the movie after that, though. Then this upcoming Saturday, B Movie Enema, the series, episode number 2, My Mom's a Werewolf, which is one of my most inexplicably favorite movies I've ever watched for B Movie Enema. I just really appreciate that movie. It's silly. It's not very good, but it's silly and it's fun and it's having fun with itself, and it doesn't take itself seriously. So I really like that movie, and I get to talk a little bit about Famous Monsters of Filmland in that episode. So, so check that out at bmovieanima.com. But Jason, where's the stuffs at for?
Stuffs.
Where's the stuffs for films?
Head over to Film Seizure.
Yeah, for that.
Yep. You just heard it. Film Seizure, filmseizure.com. Go get the stuffs there. Everything we write, everything we talk about, it's all there. You'll also be able to see kind of a little hub of places where you can like and follow us. You can follow us on the social medias at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at female seizure. Wow. At
femalianseizure.com. That's my other site. And I don't think anybody should go there.
Yeah, don't go to that site.
It's just a bunch of dick pics that I put. What? Chuck, why did you say that, Chuck? filmseizure.com.
Filmseizure.com. Yep. And you can also listen to us at YouTube, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Audible, Podcasts, whatever, all those places. You'll find us.
Yeah. Just go to wherever your favorite podcasts are found and then add us to your favorites, because we will become your favorite podcast probably.
Probably. Undoubtedly.
Indubitably. Whatever. Fuck it. Let's go to 1930 Chicago, guys.
Let's
do that. So until then, I'm Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I'm Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.